BMW's N57 is a straight 6 and N47 are straight 4 cylinders diesel engines. They replaced in accordance M57 and M47 engine. M57 production from 2008 up to 2019 year, N47 production from 2007 up to 2014 year. These engines are very common and you'll find them in many BMW E and F series and even in a mini models. Very first N47 model, the 4-cylinder engines had very common problems with timing chains. There was many cases about broken timing chains and timing chain guides. Also the fuel system problems. When debris from fuel pump contaminated the whole fuel feeding system. Many of these cases were ended in engine change. Talking in general, these engines are a bit more maintenance care consuming. Many users consists that in scheduled oil change and timing chain system maintenance, these engines had no problems at all. So let's talk about what you need to take in mind if you are planning to go with these BMW N47 and N57 engine models. Let's start with the standard oil changes that you need to do. In maintenance guide there is stated that oil change interval can be up to 15,000 miles for new engines. But when your car is getting up to 100,000 miles and more, you need to preserve the life of your engine, then you definitely need to do oil change more often. While the standard oil change in most cars is about 10,000 miles or once a year. Although if you want to be really particular and really careful with your engine, especially with these engines, thanks to their rather fragile timing chains, you can even move that close to every 5,000 miles. Also, engine oil change in time is a crucial factor because these engines have many cases with crankshaft rod bearing squeezed and damaged crankshaft. Often oil change removes small particles of metal from oil. It removes possibility that these metal particles will contaminate the system and plugs engine oil lube channels. This prevent from situations when your engine will not get enough lubrication in critical areas like rod bearings, what leads to full overhaul of your engine or replacement. While replacing oil, there is a good practice to cut your old oil filter and check for metal particles in it. If you find them, there is first sign that you have rod bearing issues. Now let's talk about transmission fluid lifetime. Especially if you have ZF8 type, 8-speed automatic gearbox, BMW says that the fluid is lifetime supported. But the manufacturer of these gearboxes states that you should change it after 60,000 miles or after 8 years, whichever comes first. Doing that flush isn't very complicated thing looking through maintenance complexity. Also you will need to replace the bottom of the pan as that has the filter housing in it. The next topic is about problems with timing chains. First problem is the locations of the whole timing chain. It is in the back of the engine. So speaking in maintenance terms, you need to remove the engine or the transmission gearbox only to get access to these chains. That takes maintenance time consumption and rises the price of this job when performing it in the car repair shop. Recommended timing chain changing interval is between 100,000 and 150,000 miles. Usually when timing chain is going to the end of its life, it starts making rattling sound on a cold start of the engine. Also, as mentioned above, especially on older models, there are cases when the timing chain guides cracks and deteriorates oil system of engine. So there is no option to wait the rattling sound, because there can be sliders issue too. So keep your chain nice and tense. as their effectively worn out timing chain and timing chain guides gives a slack along timing chain. That means it can jump the sprocket teeth and ruin all timing. It also can to big engine overhaul or even engine change. The next thing on the list is the EGR system or exhaust gas recirculation system. What it does is siphon off a bit of your exhaust gas, then cool them down through an EGR cooler and then send them back into your intake manifold. This process is useful for reducing NOx emissions and for better complete combustion, but the downside is that you're essentially sending dirty air into your intake system and cover everything with carbon, which especially on these engines, can cause issues. This is the same problems like on predecessor M57 and M47 engines. If you want to help reduce those future issues, you can either have the system cleaned regularly or to remove and blank off the EGR as well. You should do this at your own risk as it's generally not advised and not legal. In theory you would get a bit better fuel economy. Although again, do that one at your own risk. One of the related issues I was mentioning with the EGR is that because your EGR is pumping a load of effectively sticky carbon into your intake manifold, the swirl flaps which are inside your intake manifold that regulate airflow. Those are mounted to a control rod that runs the entire length of your intake manifold. And with the carbon buildup, it makes the control rod have to work harder to move swirl flaps around, and over time the rod wears and can snap and the whole thing or assembly can fall into your engine, which is going on very big overhaul of your engine. Next to the list is the DPF or diesel particulate filter. It is for soot reduction, and basically it's a box that sits behind your turbo, and in this car if you take the top of the air box off you can see it down left-hand side of the engine. This filter effectively gets clogged up with carbon by the time. There is a process called DPF regeneration which the car should do automatically, but essentially it's running the engine hot and running the exhaust gases heat up to the levers so that it can burn all of the carbon out of it, and that process only happens when you meet a certain set of criteria, mostly driving at a high enough speed over 40 or more miles an hour, with no error codes, and things like over half a tank of fuel, an engine over its normal working temperatures. Basically, you need to go for a reasonably long drive on the motorway to clean it out at least once a month. DPF regeneration process should be automatic. With the special tools you can start a forced regeneration. If you are driving only in city, there are cases when your DPF can clog quite soon, because you do not give right conditions for auto regeneration. Clogged DPF can add too much back pressure on your turbine, so you can potentially be damaging your turbo, meaning that needs to be replaced as well. DPF filter, it's a fairly expensive part, but in general this part is quite reliable. With auto regenerations done on time it can last up to 200,000 miles or even more. Take a note when replacing the engine oil to use exact engine oil type for engines with DPF filter system. This will make you DPF lifetime longer. Usually DPF problem starts over 200,000 miles and it is caused by normal wear of engine. This happens when other engine systems like mentioned below are not working proper. 1. Not proper work of fuel injectors, imbalanced fuel injection and injectors deterioration. 2. Removed EGR valve can speed up clogging of DPF filter. 3. Removed and plugged intake manifold swirl flaps also can speed up clogging of DPF filter. 4. Problems with cooling system can stop from auto regeneration process. BMW engines have multiple thermostat system and quite common issue when one or more cooling system thermostats are not working proper and engine cannot get to full working temperature. 5. Malfunctions in glow plug system. 6. Poor maintenance of engine. Hidden engine faults which can only be seen with special tools can do not let the auto regenerations happen. You must periodically check for fault codes and solve them immediately. Clogged DPF filter usually results reduced thrust of your car.